Hey, what is happening, my Spook Junkie family? Oh, man, I tell you what. Yesterday was the crazy worst day, for me anyway. I hope your guys' week has been going awesome so far. But anyway, my editing software is, I don't know, it's wacko. So I had to re-download it and do all this other stuff. But anyway, I think it's back to normal now. Who's to say? The big benefit though is I stay away from I've been staying away from the news for I think the past 3 days, and I feel amazing. Stay away from the news. Don't watch the news. Take that time to decompress. Your body and mind doesn't need all that negativity. It doesn't. It's all a bunch of nonsense out there anyway. It's driving me crazy. But, that's why I turned off the news. I suggest you do the same thing. You'll feel 100 times better. I tell you, it's crazy out there. There's something going on. I don't know what it is, but there's something definitely going on. Anyway. I'm the real crackhead, reacting to what some say are the scariest videos on the internet. But hey, you and me both know that a lot of it can be debunked, and oftentimes it is. At least a good 95% of it. But, which reminds me, if there are any audio or video engineers out there that know how a lot of this stuff could possibly be done, please leave it in the comments, please. Leave it in the comments, because I don't know. I have the foggiest idea. I see something that looks real. Hey, it's real. If there's something I can debunk, hey, I'm debunking it. And that's just kind of the way it is. So I take it for what it is. For anything else, it's just really awesome and fun to watch these things together, right? So, with that being said, let's get to, let's see, this person. I'm always doing new people right now. So this one's the Paranormal Files. Hey, that name says a lot. Covers a lot. The title is No One Has Ever Been Allowed to Film in This Haunted House. Until now. Minnesota's scariest place. Hey, should feel pretty privileged about that, huh? So anyway, not sure how the internet's going to act up. I've got a lot of people in this house, and they all are using the same... They're all tapped into this internet here. So forgive me if it gets a little choppy here and there. There's really not much I can do about it, except for maybe getting a router that I can put right there on my desk. So it's my own router and nobody is tapped into it. It's really the only way. Hopefully, the internet gods will be kind to us. I don't know. It's kind of crazy out there. There's something in the air. But we'll see. All right, here we go.
I believe this is one of the most active buildings in the whole of Minnesota.
Tonight, we have been given special access. We're the first people to ever record a paranormal investigation at this location.
This is a static.
This is really a very interesting place, and it's also quite active as far as the former residents still being around.
So they actually did operations, and his surgery was in this building.
Right?
And I think they may have buried body parts as well. The skull sitting on the shelf there. I do believe that's actually a real skull. He actually performed operations on this table.
In the house? This guy performed operations in the house? All right. Definitely should be something here. Okay, well, that didn't come out great. Documentary contains disturbing. Doesn't fit on the screen. That's not me, because I'm all dialed in. Long Prairie, Minnesota, huh? Everybody, welcome to the Christie House. Nice looking house, though. He performed operations in that house. almost looks like the Amityville. Obviously, it's around Christmas. You don't see lightning rods.
What's up, everybody?
anymore.
Colin here. It is a very, very cold night here in Minnesota. We are currently in Long Prairie. This is a very small community near Sauk Center where the Palmer House Hotel is located, birthplace of Nobel Prize winner Sinclair Lewis. And tonight, we have been given special access. We're the first people to ever record a paranormal investigation at this location, to a building known as the Christie
go,
House,
my brother.
which is behind me. Adrian, who has joined us on some investigations, he is a local historian, paranormal researcher, and a self-professed psychic. He is joining us tonight for this investigation, and this is a really, really crazy house. The energy inside of the building is already spiking on our devices. Jeff and I are here together. It's late at night. It's almost 8 o'clock, and yeah, it's a very, very eerie place. But some people call this spot the most haunted house in Minnesota. So we're gonna see tonight if that holds up. Ready to go inside?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's go.
Remember when I used to have hair? Not anymore. Hey, don't have to use that much shampoo anymore.
Feeling good, feeling good. This is first time ever. It's cold again, but this is a really cool interior to this home. Everything's pretty much original, and like Adrian said, probably the most haunted location he's ever been into, for sure in Minnesota. First time anybody's ever been allowed to investigate it. So they've got Tiffany lights and a very expensive china and just lots of expensive things. So I can see why, you know. So anyway, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Let's go.
So don't break anything.
So this is the Christie House. It was built in 1901, and it was a house that was owned by 2 generations of doctors. The original Dr. Christie, George Christie, first of all, he came to Sauk Center looking for a place to start a practice. He came on the railroad. Sinclair Lewis' father, he recommended Long Prairie because there was no doctor here. He eventually settled here. He went back to Wisconsin, married his wife. They lived here, had 4 children, and his first wife died in 1910. He remarried a high school sweetheart of his who also was a teacher, and she came and lived here, and she raised the boys. This is a very unique place, mostly because everything, or almost everything, in this building is original. This is the kitchen. The table here, which is their kitchen table, was used for surgery even up until 1917.
Wow.
So anyway, this is really a very interesting place, and it's also quite active as far as the former residents still being around. Let's move on. Wheelchair.
Wow. Oh.
So this is the maid's workroom. These are the original curtains.
So is this an actual medical wheelchair?
Oh yeah.
And that would have been used for some of the treatments?
Oh sure.
Wow. Yeah.
A lot of stuff was stored up in the hayloft of the carriage house.
An old jug. You know, some of those old jugs go for some really good money right now on eBay.
There were several
They're original.
hospitals here in town. They were actually houses until the big hospital, the new hospital, I think it was built in 1953. Oops. This is the pantry. Anytime that the family wanted to be served, they had a maid, they would ring a bell. The poor maid would have to come in
sounds like
and
the
pass the
notification
food
bell.
from one person to another because they wouldn't do it themselves. Everything in the cupboards are original. Some of it is very expensive. This plate is Haviland Limoges porcelain from France. So this is the dining room. If you look at the place settings here, you can see each person had his own butter slab. Each person had his own salt container. Then this was a bone plate so that if you were chewing on a chicken of some sort and there were bones, that's where they would go, so they weren't on the plate.
Well, you guys better be careful walking around this place.
There's another bell too, which
Break
is
one thing,
used
could ruin
to
you.
call people. They're in all the rooms. This room has not been redone, anything. Many of the rugs were up in the attic. They liked music. There was a Victrola set over here. This is all mechanical.
That's awesome that it still works like that. Funny thing is, you can buy a brand new turntable nowadays and it'll be broken within a month or so. It's freaking funny. Craftsmanship back then was awesome. Oh, look at those chops. Look at that little Wolverine action. That's pretty.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
That's crazy.
I know. So, let's move on. These are Tiffany, and there are several of them. If you look up
See
here,
a hat that I
you'll see
want.
a very beautiful stained glass window. This is the daughter's room, Edith. Edith had an appendicitis, and the doctor had to take her by train down to Minneapolis to have her checked out, but she died of septicemia.
Wow, that's sad.
But this is
I
her
had my
doll.
appendix out, man. It was
These are
scary
her clothes.
because it burst inside. They
There's
just
a picture
barely
of
got
Edith.
Wow.
So Edith passed away.
back then. If it burst inside of you, there was no
And
hope.
if you look here,
It's-
there was a lock of her hair, which was a common thing of remembrance. Also her shoes. So, moving on.
it's a lot of her hair.
This is the master bedroom. This was in the attic in a box. It was Susan West Christie's wedding dress. If the doctor went out at night, he would close the pocketed doors, and when he would come back, he wouldn't wake his wife up. He would sleep here when he came home. Again, the bed, and these are clothes that were worn by the actual Dr. George Christie, original colors for the shirts.
Yep. And he looked like he had a fairly big foot,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Over there.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it?
Isn't that crazy?
It's funny. Husbands nowadays, they bust in that room. Oh, honey, I didn't mean to wake you up.
There is no whole light.
Different time back then.
This is
With
a
respect.
container for the hair that the women would take out from their brushes. If you look here, there is a book. It's a signature book, a guest book that many people had, and people who came to stay with them would write either a piece of poetry or a thank you note or some verse. Eva Lindbergh,
thank
who
you
married
note.
their oldest son,
What is that?
half-sister to Charles Lindbergh, has written this. This is the maid's room. Here's a picture of a young woman who was actually a maid. She was quite young, I think around 15, 14. The second Mrs.
Wow.
Christie knew her
Pretty young
mother.
woman.
She came to spend time here. She was the one who was complaining about being rung for all the time. We found out that she died shortly after she left here. Her mother was sick. She lived in Iowa. So she's still here in the house. And Adrian first met her when he entered the house for the first time. The reason why, according to Adrian, that she was here or still here is because this was the happiest place that she'd ever lived. There are things that move, awesome. Things that fall off of things. She's here as well as several others. The second Mrs. Christie was an artist. She was a painter. Here are shoes that belong to, I think, the second Mrs. Christie. You can see the styles. It's quite a space.
Yes, it is.
This is the daughter of the
so
second
it's almost
Mrs.
like
Christie.
we're just on a tour.
She died at a young age too. And this is the Navy uniform for Dr. Bob Christie, the son. The oldest son, who was married to Eva Lindbergh, was a member of the Masons. As a matter of fact, he was the head of the Minnesota Masons for a time. And these are his regalia. So these come from the family. The second Mrs. Christie and the first Mrs. Christie were both members of the Masons.
Oh, and, seen that before.
It's pretty interesting. This is Dr. Robert in the Navy wearing his wool bathing suit.
Can you imagine that? A wool bathing suit.
He never married. So, it's a great place. It's quite active too.
Great.
Yeah.
My name is Adrian Lee. I'm the founder of the International Paranormal Society, and we're here in Long Prairie this evening to investigate the Christie House. No one has ever filmed a paranormal investigation inside the Christie House before, so we're excited to be here tonight, and we can't wait to get in there and get started. I have investigated this building before many times, and I'm going to take you through the front door now, and I'm going to discuss the history, some of the ghosts, and some of the things we're hoping to happen tonight. This house was built in 1901 by Dr. Christie. Dr. Christie came to this area because Dr. Lewis, who was Sinclair Lewis's dad in Sauk Centre, the guy that won the first Nobel Prize for literature, said to his friend, you should come into this area, they need some doctors. So they actually did operations, and his surgery was in this building. And I think they may have buried body parts as well out in the yard. It wasn't uncommon during this period of history that if you amputated a limb, for example, you would just bury a hole in the yard and put it in there.
Really?
What else would you do with it, I guess? So
me.
come with me now, we'll go through the front door and we'll talk about some of the ghostly activity.
Oh.
We're going to start our journey tonight in the kitchen, and you'll think to yourself, well, why the kitchen? What's important about that? The table we have our equipment on here is the original table that Dr. Christie used back in the day. Imagine the Edwardian era. There was no operating tables. It's a small town in the Midwest in Minnesota. He actually performed operations on this table. So you can imagine soaked into this table is pain, grief, anguish. People may have had body parts removed. I wouldn't be surprised if young ladies gave birth on this very table.
Wow.
I've set up equipment on this table before and seen a lot of poltergeist activity. I have a great piece of footage where we had a stable camera on a tripod and we saw lots of orbs flying around, and then suddenly my trigger objects were thrown across the room. Also a lot of shadow play. In the doorway we walk through very shortly, you often see somebody standing, almost as if the maid is waiting to be called into the dining room as Dr. Christie presses the bell that's on the floor. And remember, this is a fully functioning surgery here. So if we throw back some of these, you can see all of the medicines. Imagine you're warming up some of these syringes and some of these scalpels on this very stove to sanitize them back in the day. And there's
Wow.
Dr. George Christie there. We're going to wander through now into the dining room. Remember, there's a bell on the floor. It's a very middle-class society. I've done investigations in this room before, and the one piece of evidence that I got coming through, I think there was
So
better
far,
than
I'm
any
not
other,
seeing any
was I had a
investigation.
small
Just
child
these guys are
come
just talking
through
about
and asked for her
investigations.
mummy. Now, Dr. Christie
this
had a
video's almost
small
over.
daughter called Edith,
Yes, we
and
got
she
all
was
that.
only 8-9 years old, and she had a bowel obstruction, became very ill, and Dr. Christie tried to operate on her. and it was unsuccessful, and they took her to Minneapolis for further treatment, and she actually died, and that was their only daughter. So I've had an EVP in this very area of a little girl asking for her mummy. She was going, mummy, 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 and she said that 3 or 4 times. So I think Edith may still be around, and we may get a chance to talk to her as we progress around the building. The parlour's a very interesting place. I know at least 2 bodies that were left out in a wake in the very spot I'm standing in. Little Edith, of course, and also Susan.
Well, here we go.
Susan, who was his first wife, also died and was laid out in this area. I want to tell you very briefly about the history of words. This is a very old-fashioned word, isn't it, parlour? It's the sort of thing our grandmothers would have said to us. During the Victorian period, they suddenly realised about germology and bacteria, and they thought it probably wasn't a good idea to have your deceased relatives laid out in the room next to the dining room where you're eating. So progressively they decided to set up little places around the town to take your dead bodies to, so they weren't laid out in a wake in the parlour. Those places initially weren't very successful. Why would you take your auntie, your sister, your wife to a place they've never been in their life? This was the house they were born in and lived in. So they called them funeral parlours and funeral homes in the hope that people would gradually start to bring their dead bodies into these areas. When the bodies finally ended up in these locations, this was no longer called the parlour. This was then called the living room, because this is now the room for the living. Very interesting. There's a lot of energy comes through this area. There's almost a circle on the floor here. And a bit later on this evening, we're going to run some K2 meters, some MEL meters. We're going to measure the energy, because on my trips to this location, there's almost a column of energy that goes through the whole building. It goes from the basement through the bedroom upstairs and then into the attic when we get up there. And there's an old Vitrola made by Edison in the corner of the room here. This was built in 1917, and it's been very successful. It's called the familiarity theory, or the Singapore theory. We're going to play an old piece of music from the period on this Vitrola, and we're hoping that some of the energy in this room starts to respond to that music. That's been very successful for me in the past. So we're going to head up the stairs and start looking into the bedrooms. We're currently standing now in the stairwell, and you can see the fabulous stained glass window. Stained glass windows were so expensive during the day, during the period of history we're looking at here, that when families went on vacation, they actually took the windows out, boarded them up so people wouldn't steal them. I had an interesting encounter on this stairwell. We had a full spectrum camera, and we saw an actual body, a spectral being, starting to appear in this stairwell on our full spectrum camera. So we think the maid may have followed us around when we were walking around. That is a beautiful window, though. Look at that. And we've got a nice piece of footage of a ghoul-shaped figure standing here at the bottom of the stairwell. We're now in the room that George Christie's son Robert actually lived in right up until 1974 when he died. And this is Edith's doll, the young lady that died, unfortunately, from the bowel obstruction, his daughter Edith. This is her very doll. So it might be quite interesting to see if we get any EVPs or any kind of interaction with that particular doll in this room. And she did actually own that back in the day. We find ourselves now in the guest bedroom, and below us was the parlour where I said that column of energy came through the building, almost like the scene in Ghostbusters with the fire station. But again, that column can be measured in this area, and we can set equipment up here to measure the electromagnetic fields that are coming through the building. But again, very odd that we should have that column of energy streaming through the building from the bottom to the top. We're now in the attic at the top of the building, and that column of energy comes through this whole building. The best photograph I have ever taken of a ghost anywhere in my career over the last 25 years all over the world was taken in this very spot. I was standing where our cameraman Colin is currently standing, and we were filming, and we saw the reflection of a ghost in this very mirror. When we analysed the footage, it was a gentleman standing there. They must have been standing next to our cameraman at the very moment.
A little bit.
And it was actually Dr. George Christie. We compared the photographs to the footage, and it was actually him standing there observing us, watching what we were doing. The best photograph of a ghost I've ever taken. I believe this is one of the most active buildings in the whole of Minnesota that I've investigated, just through the amount of activity and the unusual activity, the poltergeist activity in the kitchen, the energy going through the parlour, the fishing bobbers flying around, the photograph of Dr. Christie in this very mirror, the maid appearing at the bottom of the stairwell, just a huge mixture of things going on where you're running from one room to the next trying to catch up with all the activity and everything that's taking place. So I'm hoping we'll be
here we go. You know,
we'll be in for a very active night.
And why do you think it's haunted? I mean, if nobody died here necessarily, what's your thoughts?
There's several reasons. It could be haunted on the back of the fact that we have a surgery here in a doctor's room where people came in pain, people had operations, things were done to those individuals, perhaps with very limited anesthesia back in the day. I also think this is such a nice house, and all the furniture that you see around you is original to the house, which is very strange. That doesn't happen very often. A lot of the historical buildings we go into don't have the original furniture, but everything you see around you belonged to the Christies. This was the room up here in the attic where the boys used to play. You can imagine coming up here, there's a telescope, there's books, you know, there's a couple of beds. This was a room that people lived in. They loved this house. And why wouldn't you come back and haunt the house that you built, you loved, you raised your children in, and you spent your life in? This is the surgery that Dr. Christie actually used and performed his operations in. Many of the local residents of Long Prairie still remember as a small child actually being inoculated and seeing Dr. Christie in this area. He has his journal here and everyone's listed all of their complaints, everything that he treated them for, plus
maybe
how much he charged them, of course.
An investigation.
Just
Maybe
perhaps
this is just
the skull sitting on the shelf there. I do believe that's
documentary.
actually a real skull, and you don't find that around too much these days. Again, the stained glass windows reflect his hobbies and of course the medical profession here, if we take a closer look. But again, there must be a lot of activity in this area. If I turn you around now and we start to look at some of the equipment we have here, some of the potions, the stethoscopes, all of the surgical tools, and of course Dr. Christie's case in case he was called out in the middle of the night and someone was struggling perhaps with giving birth or maybe
it is amazing
having an
seeing
accident.
all that
Imagine
stuff
having to go
sitting
out
there like that.
in January in a cold Minnesota blizzard
Untouched.
to deliver a child at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well,
But that's where we were, and that's what he did back in the day.
Wow.
Come on, get with the investigation.
We got Adrian right here. What's up, guys?
They're about to rob a bank, by the way.
Waiting to pull out the revolvers.
To the parlor.
To the parlour.
Jeff, you ready?
I'm ready.
It was Jim with the lead piping in the parlour.
Which way should we move?
A lot of the energy is in about this area.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
let's
I
put the
would-
REM pod right there.
I would put a few K2 meters around, and it probably wouldn't be the end of the world to introduce ourselves and then have Jim fire up the
Yes.
controller would be the way. See, look at that already. See,
Whoa.
look how that's, and that only does it in that spot, and it goes all the way through the house.
Okay.
But we spread out
There we
those, and they only went about 6.
Yeah, it's not a big circle, almost like a hula hoop.
Interesting.
Oh, that
Okay,
almost
so we're going to
almost went
begin
up
this
to red.
investigation in the parlor room. This is where they held viewings of bodies after family members had died. It was a gathering place. People would listen to music, kind of hang out in here. So we figured this is naturally a good place to begin investigating, just because there was a lot of energy here in life and possibly in death too. So, you ready?
I'm ready. Trying to get the flare going.
But this is a static meter.
Oh, there.
Whoa. So not only are we measuring
Oh, look.
EMF, but this is also measuring static now. So you're actually getting two types of energy being
So
recorded
what's
on
the
these
range on that?
devices at
That's
the
what I'm
moment.
curious about. How far does it? detect static.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So we've got quite the ratio.
How far do you have to be
I
away
think the
from
other
it?
one stopped too. Oh,
There, that one's.
there's the REM
Yeah,
pod
REM
right
pod
there.
hit.
What we would want
Oh,
to happen
sir.
is if Jim fires up,
Okay.
if we get Jim to start the Vitrola and play some Edwardian music, I think we might increase the activity. I think with the energy we're getting here, I'd like to see that increased with the familiarity of listening to some music from that period.
Not hitting.
Yep. Okay, guys. Also, by the way, to anybody who's in the house, I know that I am new. My dad is new. My name is Colin, and
I'm Jeff.
Well, that's pretty cool,
And-
son.
we're here tonight just to talk to you. No negativity, no disrespect at all, and the highest respect for you guys. And we would just love to hear what you have to say.
Oh,
Oh.
here we go.
Great timing.
K2's on.
So for our first experiment tonight, just like Adrian suggested, we are going to play some of the music that you heard a little bit of earlier from the what's that? What
The
is it called?
Vitrola.
From over there in the corner. The Vitrola music will be playing, and we're going to see if that triggers
Notice
any
there's
sort
only
of a
one
response
guy
by
there
the
wearing a
listeners.
mask. That guy in the corner is the only guy wearing a mask.
Oh, look at that one's going way stronger now.
So it's almost in beat with the music now.
Wow. Part 2. So now we gotta watch part 2. Okay. Not that it's a bad thing. Wow. Okay, guys. Well, not exactly what I expected. I mean, it was more of a documentary type thing, but I will put in part 2. Nope, just dropped my pen. Anyway, I'll remember it. I'll write it down. But anyway, so, oh gosh. Okay. Well, you know, okay. I mean, yeah, I saw the lights go on, little things here and there. I mean, I don't, like I said before, I'm not sure exactly how far away from the devices that you have to be in order for it not to be contaminated. Not, you know, I just don't know. Maybe there's some paranormal investigators out there that can chime in and tell me how far you actually have to be from one of those devices before it, you know, lights up or whatever. The music didn't seem like it did too much to it. You know, I mean, I saw more activity when they first turned it on. It almost went up to the red, that one that I think it's called a millimeter or something like that. I think that almost went up to the red when they first got there. And he was talking about his father, you know, the father and son thing. So anyway, we will watch part 2 because, hey, look, we're already invested in it. But, man, I really seriously hope they don't go on and on about this history about this house. I was not expecting that, you know, and I'm sure you guys weren't either. So anyway, but hey, it is what it is. Anyway, don't watch the news. It's depressing. Stay away from it. Give yourselves a break from the news for about a week, and you will feel, I'm telling you, you will feel so much better. Anyway, love you guys. I'm out of here. Sorry about the internet, and I think it was my webcam was acting up or something. I don't know. You know, what can you do? You know? Love you guys. And I will see you tomorrow with part 2 of this one. So see ya. I'm already telling you which one it's going to be. It's going to be part 2. Take care, guys.